Dear students, this video shall help you in order to develop a little bit on your data gathering techniques and to make sure that the data gathering techniques for more or less fit with your proposal. So we have arrived here, we have discussed the grounded theory, and you have started to explain more or less how the grounded theory might not or might fit to your research proposal. The next important step that you need to do is to actually start gathering data. Obviously, there are various forms to do so and various techniques that might be helpful in order to gather data. The most common forms in qualitative research, and you might already read about that now in the Basics of Qualitative Research book, is field observation and interviews. And different forms of interviews. And along with the grounded theory, we have read already about unstructured or open interviews, semi-structured interviews, and structured interviews, whilst the first and the second might rather fit with the grounded theory. The third one is the less appropriate in order to follow a grounded theory methodology. However, this does not mean that you cannot work with structured interviews. In some cases, structured interviews might be the best form to gather data, especially if you have a clear idea and you work with a theoretical framework that does not allow much of let's say, if you do not have a lot of space for moving things around, if you do not want to recover something that is in the back of the concepts that you're working with, when you have concepts that you can operationalize in clear ideas or questions. If you talk with an expert and you want to find some kind of specific answers to specific questions that will help you in order to answer your research question, in all of those cases, structured interviews might be a better idea. This might also be true for those interviews in which you do not have a lot of time. In fact, time might be a crucial question in order to plan your interviews. Imagine you want to interview someone after a movie, or you want to interview someone after a restaurant visit. In those cases, it might be really difficult to ask them to give some kind of open, very open interview with open questions and so on and so on. In this case, a kind of a very structured interview might be better, not just in order to get the best data, which might or might not be the case, but in fact in order to get people to give you some important and valuable answers. Having said that, let me talk a little bit more about the open interview that we or that you read about in the book on the basics of qualitative research. A very important thing, and that's a general thing to interviews, but especially to open interviews, is to keep research question somehow open so that people can answer in a certain form, in a certain way, and not answer just that what you expect from them. Let's say you want to find something out about students' motivation. If you ask them directly for their motivation and the links of this motivation with some kind of variable X, you will probably get the answer that you want to hear, but you will probably find out very little whether this answer that you actually get represents the truth or not, whether this has really something to do with students' motivation or not. Because in these cases, usually students in this case, but in general, people try to affirm more or less what they think that we expect from them. So giving people somehow a kind of an open context in order to narrate themselves about what they experienced, what they felt, what they seen, what they perceived, can sometimes be much more useful, in many cases I would say, than to actually fix down or bring down the interview's question to the concrete point of research that you're actually focusing upon. So this brings me, for example, to the possibility to do life story interviews And I do not want to say that this is the best way to do so, it's just the way I used to work. So life story or autobiographic interviews is something that I really like, because you ask people for telling you their life story, and they themselves start to bring things together, to relate different topics together, and you have then the possibility to actually reflect and analyze in how far some of these things are related, how they are related. But you can do that afterwards. It's not necessary that you actually force the interview to make these kind of connections. Yeah, if you do not work with life story interviews, there are many forms to use open interviews. But usually, if you start with a breaking the ice question, you should probably think about something that, on the one hand side, engages people to talk, and on the other hand, leaves things open enough so that they can narrate a little bit what they want to talk about. So don't try to be direct from the very beginning. This is in fact the most crucial difference that we could say between qualitative research interviews and interviews of journalists, for example, who would try to ask, contradict, directly go for questions, insist, and so on and so on. Social science and cultural science and all kind of other science researchers that work with qualitative methods try to avoid this kind of forceful behavior with regards to their interviewees. Despite interviews on which I have given now quite an extensive talk, there are obviously other techniques or methods. There is a kind of a discussion whether we should here talk about techniques or methods. Probably something you could discuss and engage with a little bit more on the wiki. For example, focus groups. Why would you do focus groups? In fact, we could say focus groups are a specific form of interviews where you do not just interview a single individual, but you interview a whole group. But depending on how you design the focus group discussion, you can do that more directly or in a more experimental form by giving them some kind of input and then see in how far they discuss some kind of issue or topic. Advantage of focus groups is that you can actually do kind of or create a kind of a discussion and kind of discursivation of certain topics without you yourself intervening too much, and seeing how people interact and react and discuss with each other in an almost everyday life context. So for example, for the studies of elders, focus groups are usually a very good and valuable form to gather data, because elders talking with each other feel obviously quite much more comfortable than being interviewed by some kind of scientific that might relate or stir up certain emotions, negative emotions, fears, saying something wrong, insecurities, and so on and so on. Same might be true with other topics. Talking with relatives of sick people, for example, might be a good idea or might be an option to work with focus groups. Political stuff, especially in order to see political dynamics, can be very interesting in discussing in focus groups. The last thing that we've missed out here that is from huge importance for this step is the field observation. Field observation means basically a systematic view, systematic observation of a certain topic in a field environment. For example, if you want to analyze people's behavior in a specific public place, you would probably sit there doing memoing, observing what people do, how they act, how they interact, how they behave, and so on and so on. Combination of different techniques is also possible. It's not difficult to imagine how this kind of observation in a public space might then be related to some interviews, what people did, what people experienced, what people felt, and so on. So combination is possible there. Another important thing to gather data is the gathering of data through the analysis of artifacts. We could see here the analysis of visual material. There's actually quite a good book by Gillian Rose called Visual Methodologies that might help you out there in order to do a good analysis of visual material, Same is true for documents. You can do an analysis of documents, political documents, read them, critically analyze them systematically. For the next step that we are going to do now, what I expect you to do is to reflect especially on what kind of method, technique in order to gather data you want to use, why you want to use it, why it fits with your research question and your proposal. And I would then like you to gather data, might be 1 or 2 interviews, a focus group discussion, a little bit of field observation, and upload it to the data gathering results part, so that I can have a look at the first data that you gathered, and then we can straight go into the process of data analysis, which will be the next step till the beginning of January. I hope this video will be helpful for you, and I'm looking forward to reading your stuff. If you have any questions to data gathering, I'm definitely up to give you additional information and comments. Looking forward to hearing from you. See you later.